Hello and welcome back to the brand new Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Cities Skylines 2. In the previous video, we mastered the basics of city building. We built this small town of nearly 5,000 residents and ended only after ensuring it had a positive cash flow. In today's video, we're going to master what I believe is the most important skill in Cities Skylines 2, road building. And we're starting here because understanding how to build a roadway network will keep our cities functional and make them more attractive. And mastering road building will enable us to develop on challenging terrain in realistic ways. Further, we'll be building upon this knowledge in the future when we discuss other forms of transportation, because most of the skills that we learn today will be foundational and directly transferable to other modes. So in today's video, we'll be covering everything from the advanced roadway tools to roundabouts, before heading on to more advanced topics like tunnels, custom interchanges, and building on challenging terrain. We'll also cover the basics of roadway hierarchy, traffic management, and I'll explain why the road maintenance depot is more important than you might realize. And if you're excited to master road building, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes in this series. And if you have a topic that you want to see discussed in this series sooner rather than later, let me know down in the comments. Or leave an emoji representing what you'd like to see covered for the sake of engagement. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Let's kick things off today by discussing the basics of roadway hierarchy. Roadway hierarchy is a way of classifying roads based upon their function, whether they are providing mobility or accessibility. Now, in general, there are 4 different types of roads. Highways obviously prioritize mobility. They connect cities to one another, and they do so at high rates of speeds. Arterials provide access across your entire city and often are the roads that link directly to your highways. Generally, these are the largest roads in your community, and they may have some of the highest rates of speed as well. Next are collectors. These provide access from one neighborhood to the next and generally link local roads to arterials. They can be larger roads and can have higher rates of speed. And then finally, we have local roads, and that is every other road in the community. One of the main reasons it's so important to understand proper roadway hierarchy is that inappropriate application of hierarchy is one of the primary reasons that you'll see crashes or traffic backups in your city. And those can cause trash to pile up in your city, dead bodies not to get picked up, sick citizens not to get picked up by ambulances, fire trucks not to reach fires, fuel not be delivered to your power plant, all of which can absolutely destroy your city. And you can prevent a lot of this with proper roadway hierarchy. In a suburban context, the rules of roadway hierarchy are usually rigidly adhered to. You can see that we've got our highway right here. It connects up to our arterial. Our collector connects to our arterial, and our local roads connect to our collectors. A big pitfall of a suburban context is that every single home and business is going to be using this collector and this arterial. In an urban context, there are generally many different ways to get around. That said, roadway hierarchy is applied in urban contexts as well. Obviously, this road right here that links up to our highway is an arterial, and our couplet's an arterial as well because it also links to the highway. For our collectors, we've got one right here, the road that goes along the river, not too many buildings taking access from it. It also doesn't link directly to our highways, but it does link to our arterials. Same story with this road right here and with this road right here. All provide access from one neighborhood to the next, link to our arterial network, and don't have many buildings taking access from them. Now, what you can see in an urban context is that things are not as rigid as they are in a suburban context. That means that we do have some uses on an arterial and we have uses on collectors as well. That said, I've tried to minimize trip-generating uses being placed on arterials and collectors. That is, for instance, why I'm placing uses like the clinic and the crematorium on local roads directly connected to an arterial, but not on the arterial itself. Placing those uses on the arterial would generate lots of traffic and accidents. Now, a very important consideration with roadway hierarchy is speed. Like I mentioned, roads prioritize access or mobility. And this is where Cities Skylines kind of holds your hand through roadway hierarchy. One-way, one-lane highways, such as these ones right here that you'd use for ramps, are all 80 kilometers per hour. All other highway segments are 120 kilometers per hour. We are not able to change the speed of these roads, and the high default speed of these roads demonstrates that the purpose of these roads is mobility. As such, we should take minimal access from these roads, and when we do have it, we should spread them apart. Now, interestingly, the medium roads and the large roads, the collectors and the arterials, generally have the exact same speeds, with the exception of one roadway type. The large roads with the median have a slightly higher speed, and that is a direct nod to roadway hierarchy. You can see that this collector right here, a medium road, has a speed limit of 35 kilometers per hour. This large road right here, without the median, 35 kilometers per hour. But if we take a look at the large road with a median, it's 45 kilometers per hour. And that's because this road with a median would prevent left-hand turns if you developed uses directly on the road itself. Again, that's a reduction in access, which means that you can have more mobility. Or a strode, your call. Ultimately, the arterial's primary purpose is mobility, and though the collector provides some mobility, it is more well suited to providing accessibility than the arterial. And lastly, we have our local roads. So that is our 2-lane local roads, our alleyways, and our pedestrian roads. Now for our local roads, we're looking at 30 kilometers per hour. For our alleyways, 25, and for our pedestrian roads, 20 kilometers per hour. However, only service vehicles and emergency vehicles can operate on these streets. Now, as you can tell on all of these streets, we have a ton of accessibility, and that is completely fine. We also have tons of intersections, and that is completely fine on local roads as well. In fact, I would say it's encouraged because it's connectivity. And that connectivity means that traffic is dispersed when there are multiple ways to get around. And then one last note about speed. In general, citizens will attempt to take the fastest route, not the shortest route. So if you have roads that have higher speeds, your citizens will take those roads. That's right, they'll prioritize higher classification roads in the roadway hierarchy. And finally, if you want to make sure that your roadway hierarchy is correct, you might need to control your traffic signals. For instance, right now we currently have traffic signals on basically every single junction that we have with our arterial. That will actually slow down traffic on a road that we want to prioritize mobility on. And because of that, we may want to remove some signals on this street. Conversely, we may want to ensure that our arterial and collector connections have traffic signals so that regardless of which road you're taking, you have easy and safe passage from one road to the next. But the ability to add and remove signals is not something that's available to you by default. For that, we have to unlock our advanced roadway services. To unlock our advanced road services, we'll go underneath our progression menu, and then underneath the development tree under roads, we have basic road services, then advanced road services. So this gives you things like the road maintenance depot, traffic lights, stop signs, and roadside decorations. This is only one development point, so it's generally one of the first things that I unlock. It's so incredibly useful. Now, when you unlock this, you'll find it underneath roads, and then there's the last tab right here, road services, which is now unlocked. Now, everything in here is unlocked with the exception of a sound barrier. That only unlocks after you've unlocked highways, which we haven't unlocked yet. First things first, though, we have the road maintenance depot, and you might not think that you need to build this right away, but I would highly recommend that you do, particularly if you're powering your city with coal. And the main reason for that is the road maintenance depot repairs your roads, and if your roads are in poor condition, what you're going to see is a lot more accidents. They also clear the accidents, and if you are powering your city with coal, that can mean that you don't get coal at your power plant. It can also mean that your garbage doesn't get collected because there are lots of accidents. So this is something you want to get right away. And if you're in a snowy climate, they also clear the snow, so you're going to want that for that as well. Now, I mentioned the roadway condition, and when you click into this menu, you're going to see this roads info view show up. And you can see that for the most part, our roads are in okay condition, but over time, they will all degrade. Well, all the ones that we built anyway, all the roads that came with the map will remain in good condition. So I think that we need to place one of these, and I'm going to place this out here in our little industrial park. I know that I don't want to place this on Sunnyside Lane because I'm going to eventually upgrade this into a collector. So what I'm going to do is turn off my snapping and face the building this way. I'm also backing it off from Fairview Street because we will create an interchange here later on in the episode. And here we go. We can see the vehicles emerging from this facility. Now, do know that these little vehicles that are repairing the road, they stop like this one just did, and that can cause a bit of congestion as well. It's highly temporary, but if you see that happening, that is why they are repairing the roads. This building has wages, and you can see that right here. We're currently looking at $47,000 per month in wages because of the 30 employees here. Now, also know that you can upgrade this facility, and if you do that, it's right within the footprint of the building, so you don't have to worry about reserving additional space around this. But for now, I think we are just fine with the building as it is. Heading back into our road services menu, we now have traffic lights available to us. So this is going to be a really important one, particularly along our arterial road. I want to actually make sure that we don't have traffic lights all the way up and down here. So by default, when you have a larger road like this, either a medium or a large road, it will get a signal on every single intersection. That is not necessarily the preferred treatment here. Now, if I had this tool selected and I right mouse click, I remove the signals. So we'll have a free movement on the higher classification roadway, and on the lower classification roadway, we'll have the yield sign, which is a fine treatment. So up and down here, I'm gonna do that until I get to some of our collectors. So this one right here, for instance, I'm gonna leave the signal there, and I'm just right mouse clicking on the intersection, and it's removing all of those traffic lights. And I just realized I inadvertently removed the signals here on our arterial couplet. So if I wanted to add these back in, it's just left mouse clicking, and you can add a signal into any road. Now, another thing I want to point out right here is you'll notice that when you have a path cross one of these major roads, that is a medium road or a large road, you will get signals for the pedestrians. This is a pedestrian actuator, and they are very, very, very useful. But if for whatever reason you don't want this here, right mouse click and you can remove it. It just makes it much more challenging for a pedestrian to cross this road. For me, I want that there. I think it's important that pedestrians have the ability to cross a road like this. Now, I do want to draw your attention to this intersection of Lilac Street and Main Street. This is an interesting one because Main Street is clearly the arterial and Lilac Street right here is an arterial, but this portion of Lilac is a local road. So we might want to do a bit more advanced control of this particular intersection. One thing that we could do if we think that it's overkill to have a signal here, we could say, maybe we just want a stop sign here. Maybe that is sufficient. We don't have the ability to control where stop signs are placed. So just know that if you place a stop sign, it is going to apply that stop sign at all legs of the intersection. Now we could right mouse click this and remove this, and it will take us back to that signal. And if we want to get rid of that, we again have to remove the signal. So now this might be the preferred configuration of this roadway. You'll notice that Main Street now has a free-flowing movement into Lilac Street, and this local portion of Lilac Street actually has a yield sign. And this will work just fine for you with the exception of that straight movement from Lilac into the local road. They'd actually be going directly into oncoming traffic, which you wouldn't want to see happen. And that's where these next three options can be useful. So we have the ability to control where we have left-hand turns, right-hand turns, and straight-ahead movements. Now, do know you can't control this by lane. So if you have a multi-lane road, you're not going to have the level of granularity that you might like to have, but you can do quite a few things. So right here, for instance, maybe I just want to prevent that straight movement altogether. And if you want to get to Lilac, you've got to turn from another street. So I'll just click on this, and that was left clicking this, and now we have a free-flowing right-hand movement through here. And ultimately, I think that that would do the trick in making this a safe intersection. Other things that we can do here, we can remove crosswalks. So let's say you don't want your pedestrians crossing right here, right mouse click on a crosswalk to remove it, left mouse click to add it back in. If you want to add it somewhere else in the block, it has to be where there are nodes. So just know that you can't willy-nilly add these in. So I want to add one right here. If I wanted to do that, I'd actually need to add a node there. The way that you can do that is to grab the road type that we have here and then double click right in the middle of the road. And now when we come back through, you'll see that there's a node there. Another way that you could add a node, and this one is probably not super appropriate right here because we'll just destroy some zoning. We could draw a road connection through here, and that would add a node as well. But obviously, because this area is already built up, I'd prefer not to do that. Now, the last couple of options that we have here are partially cosmetic and partially functional. So the first option is a wide sidewalk, gives you a wider sidewalk than normal. You might want to place this in commercial districts, or especially where you have parking and you want to get the cars off the street. And that's because when you add a wide sidewalk, you remove all of the street parking. So if you want to control it, this is a way that you can do it. You could also add a grassy terrace, and that can kind of improve the aesthetics a little bit here. And you can add trees. You can't control the tree, and the trees will start out as baby trees and grow up over time. Now, do know that the trees are not just for aesthetics, they also reduce roadway noise. So if you have a very busy road with lots of noise, adding trees will actually reduce the noise pollution. There's also one more way that you can use tree planting and medians. It's kind of unique. So right here, Main Street is currently a bi-directional road, 4 lanes. And if we wanted to add our trees and our grassy terraces, they'll go right on the side of this road. But the interesting thing is if you upgrade this to a 4-lane divided road, you can do something even more interesting. Now, there are 2 different ways that you can place things in this road. So obviously we have on the side, just like we had before, but you could also place it right in the center of the road. So now we have a grassy terrace right there and some trees. And ultimately, this is more of an aesthetic choice than anything. This also prevents left-hand turns. So if you are experiencing a lot of congestion due to a lot of uses being on these roads and a lot of left-hand turns through here, this might be your preferred course of action. If you are not a fan of the look of having trees or grassy terraces, you can also use the wide sidewalk here and just have a larger median if that is what you prefer. That ultimately gets rid of the parking. So if you don't want parking, that's the way that you can accomplish that. And then our final option that's available to us is lighting. Now, this is only applicable on highways. So right now, by default, you get lights on all of your local roads and your local roads will transmit power. But if you have a highway segment like this Garland highway segment that we have right here, by default, this wouldn't normally have lights, and that means it wouldn't carry power. So if you wanted to add that on, and this one already has it on, you'd hit the left mouse button. I could also remove this now if I want. Right mouse button, no more lights there. Look at that. We no longer have power being carried right here. If we add this back in, power is being carried on that roadway segment. And now that we've mastered road services, let's talk about parking. Now, though parking is not the sexiest of topics, it is a very important topic in this game. So right here, you can see that we've only got our default parking options available to us. That is parking on the sides of the road and parking in buildings that spawn with parking lots. If we wanted to do anything more than this, we would need to unlock parking. We can do that underneath our roads again in the development tree. And parking areas are available for 2 development points. Now it says right here that cars need parking spaces and areas of high activity can benefit from dedicated parking areas. And this is true. So what this will ultimately do is make driving to an area more comfortable. So that will make those businesses thrive, particularly if you have no other way to get to these areas. And it will also incentivize tourism. You got to remember, comfort is a factor, not just for your citizens getting somewhere, but also tourists. So if you're struggling to get tourists, maybe you need to add some more parking. Now, for all of our parking areas, they're found underneath roads, and then we get this new tab here called parking spaces. There are a number of different options available to us, and they vary just slightly. So any of the covered options are going to have a higher level of comfort, which means that they'll be more attractive for the folks that want to use parking. So right here, for instance, the covered motorcycle parking lot has a comfort of 60. The tiny parking lot has a comfort of 50, and that's because it's not covered. Now, as we go through these, you'll start to see that the upkeep increases as the parking lots get bigger. And if the parking lot has any sort of attendant, there will also be wages associated with that parking lot as well. So parking lots like the small parking lot right here, the very large parking lot, and the overground parking building all have attendants. And as a result, these are going to cost more than just the upkeep of the lot itself. Now, our city is relatively small, so I don't want to go crazy on parking. What I think I'm going to do is pause things right here and add some parking behind the row homes. The reason I want to do that is the row homes don't come with parking, and that's why there is so many cars on the roads right here. Now, reasonably, from a planning theory standpoint, if there's going to be street parking, I want to see it utilized because it slows down cars. That said, it's the game and I think it's kind of ugly, so I want to hide the cars behind all of these buildings. So I'm just going to run this road right here. Okay, and now before I resume this, I'm going to add some parking to the alleyways. And I think we'll go with something fairly small, maybe these tiny parking lots right here. Now, if you're struggling to see what's going on, you can close the roads menu and now you'll actually get to see your zoning grid. You have your normal snapping option. So if you want to snap this to the grid, we can easily do that. Or we could turn off snapping to the sides of the road and kind of just add this ourselves however we see fit. Now, ultimately, what we've just done is make it a ton more comfortable to park in this area. So we are going to see a lot of cars drawn to these parking lots. So just know that if you are placing parking lots, you are telling your citizens you want them to drive, particularly if you have no mass transit options available to you. Now, because of who I am, what I would do is actually remove some of the parking from the roads, and this would relocate some of these cars into the parking lots, ideally anyway. And ultimately, the upshot of adding all this parking is that the community is more comfortable for driving, and there's a higher likelihood that we will get tourists in our city. And now that we've mastered parking, let's talk about roundabouts for a moment. At the very start of a game, basic roundabouts are available here in the 6th tab. We've got these small roundabouts. We've actually already used a couple in the city. So you can use a roundabout as a cul-de-sac. That's what we've done over here. And there are 3 options available. The first option is this really basic option that just has basically a grassy center. You also have an option with a tree. Again, starts out as a baby tree. It needs to grow up over time. And then we have the small concrete roundabout with a bush. A little more decorative, and it can even be useful in areas where you'd expect to see freight traffic, because that's oftentimes where you'd see this kind of roundabout. The interesting thing about roundabouts is they can be retrofit into many different areas. That said, if you don't have space for the roundabout, it could demolish buildings around it. Now, this is an example of a spot where I think we could easily retrofit a roundabout in, and you can see that that worked out just fine because none of the buildings said overlapping building. That said, right here, replace that, you see that that building is highlighted in yellow. That means that if you place the roundabout right here, that is the overlapping item, and it will be demolished in favor of the roundabout. So just keep that in mind as you're placing these. Now, roundabouts can be really useful in intersections where you want to keep a free-flowing movement rather than having a stop sign or a traffic signal. So these are going to be areas that have a bit more traffic, and I'd imagine a place like this right here, Main Street in Lilac, could actually be a very good location for this. So earlier we had to control this area by getting rid of that free-flowing through movement, and if we wanted to have that, we might want to consider a roundabout instead. Now, the nice thing about roundabouts and Cities Skylines too is that they will conform to the number of lanes that are present. So you can see that it has done a little bit of fancy lane work right here to make sure that you can get around the roundabout and into the appropriate lane, regardless of how many legs are coming into here or the number of lanes on each of those legs. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the roundabouts is, let's say we decide to remove this one, go to the center and we delete this. It will revert back to our basic configuration. So all the work that we did here at this intersection is now gone. So if we wanted to reestablish this as it was, we would have to do that all over again. I think the roundabout is going to be sufficient here for now, so we'll add that back in. Now, before we unlock our larger roundabouts, I do want to show you something pretty neat. So we've got a roundabout right here, and if we wanted this to be a pedestrian area, we can upgrade this to a pedestrian road, and the roundabout will indeed change and look like a pedestrian area, which is really neat to see. Now, if you wanted to unlock larger roundabouts, you have to go back into your progression menu, and underneath roads, there's roundabouts here available for 1 development point. This is again one of those things I normally unlock fairly early on, because roundabouts are helpful not just for traffic flow, but for the creation of supernodes, which I'll show you how to make in just a moment. So we now have 3 additional sizes of roundabouts. We have a medium roundabout, a large roundabout, and a very large roundabout. Now, the reasons why you might want to use larger roundabouts are basically that the size of the roundabout corresponds to the capacity of the roundabout. So if you're noticing that you're having lots of traffic congestion at your roundabout, you probably just need a larger roundabout to accommodate the additional traffic volume that you have going through it. Now, even with this large roundabout, it could run out of capacity. And if it did, you might need to build your own. And to do that, we do it just like we did in Cities Skylines 1. So let's get rid of this and then build our own roundabout. To do that, hop into your roads menu and grab one of your one-way options, and then use the continuous tool to create the roundabout. Now, for this, we're going to want to go back from the intersection a little ways, and then the first click will lock onto the road. The second click should lock your 90-degree angle in. And now we want to make sure that whatever we're doing for our next click, we're getting the half roundabout that we want. So this looks like it will lead to a roundabout that is roughly centered. So we'll click right here. And then as long as we don't right mouse click and we continue to play with this tool, we'll be able to continue and finish this circle. And that's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Now, the disadvantage to this is we are going to have to do all of the management ourselves. So we'd have to go ahead and add lanes as we see fit and remove all these traffic lights because it will add them. But we're still able to create that roundabout. And this would have a ton of capacity. We could add slip lanes or all sorts of things to make this absolutely perfect for us. Ultimately, this is overkill for this area though, so I'm going to revert this back to being a normal intersection. There we go, much better. Now, I mentioned super nodes earlier, and that's what I'm going to show you next. This is where the large roundabouts really come in handy. But to demonstrate this, I want to build this area out just a little bit. And here we go. I just basically extended things up a couple more blocks, and I added this diagonal road right here at the base of the hillside and extended this road out right here from our industrial area. And unfortunately, they don't line up. So what we have instead is this mess of traffic signals. Now this would create all sorts of traffic problems, and I'm guessing that's actually why we're seeing this madness right here, where rather than staying on the collector, everyone's dipping off onto this local road and dispersing out. So if you want to fix this, there's really two routes that you could go. You could just remove the signals here altogether and not prioritize any of these movements, or we could try to have one gigantic traffic signal. The way that you're going to do this is to actually use a roundabout. So I'm going to pause this momentarily, and I'm going to sever a couple of things. So we're going to sever this road right here, this one right here, and this one right here. Now I'm trying to remember where the center of this was. It was right about here. And now I'll grab my very large roundabout and I'll place that right here. And now here's where the magic happens. So I'm going to grab my 2-lane road and run that into the roundabout. So now I'll get rid of Emerson Lane. That shifts the roundabout back a bit. Now I'll extend this road up. That shifts the roundabout a bit as well. And now I'll take this one and I'll run this one over at a 90. That shifts the roundabout over as well. And we could leave it just like this. This would be just fine. But I want to signalize this. So I'm going to take the bulldozer and delete the roundabout. And would you look at this? Now we've got a super node. So if we resume this, this is all one signalized intersection, and it will work much better than it would have if we would have just had two signals side by side. Now, the nice thing about this is you can continue to optimize and modify this. Let's say you wanted to add lanes. We could add our 5-lane asymmetric, no problem. And we're still modifying that super node. We can even remove this road from it and have one gigantic signalized intersection right there. And in this particular instance, I think that less is more. And the way that I've resolved the issue here is not a super node, but rather to actually remove one of the legs of these roads, get rid of the signals, remove some of the crosswalks, have just one that's short, not diagonal. And we even get an extra home side out of this. This is probably the right solution for this area. Now that we've mastered roundabouts, let's move on to tunnels. Now at this point, we've developed most of the easily developable land on the east side of the river. So we've got to figure out where we're going to grow next. Obviously, we could head this way, but what I think the best way for us to grow will be this way. There's a nice big flat area over here. The problem is we've got this hill right here, and that's actually why we ended our arterial right here, because we have a hill. So there are a couple of ways that we could deal with this. Now, obviously, we could just level this out, and that would be a valid way of handling this. But if you take a look, there's a lot of terrain here, a lot of dirt that need to be moved around to make that happen. So the next solution might just be to build a tunnel from this road. So you grab this, you drop your elevation step all the way down. You drop your elevation to negative 12.5 meters, which is how low you have to be to get into tunnel mode. You find the center of your tunnel and you click, and it's not a tunnel, it's cut and fill. So now you got to go even deeper. And now at negative 20 meters, we have a tunnel, and we pop up on this side, and there we go. And truthfully, this will work. He just didn't have a lot of control. So I like to have control. So rather than doing this, we're going to basically build the tunnel backwards. I want to build the tunnel before I build the connections to the road. Now, I want to make this interesting. So we're going to use our 2-lane one-way road. And basically what I want to do is go into parallel mode. We'll go half a unit separation. And then once again, we're going to drop this down to that negative 12.5 meters. So now I want to turn off snap to guidelines and make sure that my contour lines are on. And I want to identify a location that I know is going to be inside of the tunnel on either side, but not at the end. So I want this tunnel to kind of curve. So what I'm going to do is pick a spot that I think is near the mouth of this tunnel, select it once, select my midpoint, and then curve to close to the entry point of this tunnel. Now, before I set this, I just want to make sure it's as level as it can be. And as I move it around, you can see the grade changing. And honestly, I'm fairly happy with negative 1.3%. If I bump this up, I'm above ground, that doesn't work. The other alternative is I could go lower over here and then bump it up on this end, but I'm running into the exact same problem. And it looks like third time's a charm, 0.6%, that's basically flat. So now from here, you could just boost this up and make your connections, but I like to do one more thing. So I want the entry points to be relatively even. So I want to level out a place near the base of this. So I'm coming right up to this, and I can see where the tunnel ends because I have those little not connected markers. I'll do the exact same thing over here. And I can even slope from my road up to this point. And now I'll go back underground. I'm going to use my continuous tool and pop this up. And the whole reason why I did that is it will make the entry point completely level. So now I'm going to bring this back to 0 meters, and I can see that it's a 3.9% grade, which is basically flat. And now I'm going to turn off all of my snap to so I can end this exactly where I want it to be. I'm very happy with that. And if you look at this, those are completely even, completely level. And if we want that to be a nicer slope, we'll level out the top here, then use our slope terrain tool, right mouse click at the top of the tunnel, left click at the base, and slope up. I mean, bluntly, does it get much better than that? That looks outstanding. And that's just because we were a little patient with it. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. Oh, that is outstanding. I love the way that that has turned out. So now we just have our last couple connections to make. And for that, I think that the curved road tool does an excellent job. And now all that we have to do is remove the signal that it will give us here because we're joining a local road, or what it believes is a local road, with a medium road. And then even get rid of some of those crosswalks. Not a great spot for them. And now that our tunnel's complete and we've opened this area up for development, let's build a couple of interchanges. We're going to be building 2 brand new interchanges to serve this community. One right here and one right here. Now in this location, I think that we're going to build a trumpet because 3 legs is all that I want. I don't think that we'll ever need to cross the river and connect up over here. I don't want to take out those farms. Over here, on the other hand, I want to build a diamond because I do want to open up this land for future development, and a diamond will allow me to cross over the top of the highway. But before we can build any of that, we have to unlock highways, and to do that, we'll go under progression and unlock highways for 2 development points. So let's build our trumpet first. This one should be fairly simple. The very first thing I want to do is sever this road and sever this little junction right here. Now, I like to upgrade the highway to have an extra lane, and this is for our merging, but it's going to serve another purpose as well. We're going to be bridging over the top of the highway for this interchange, and the main reason for that is, number 1, the highway is already here, and number 2, we want to prioritize the highway, not the interchange, and by keeping the highway flat, we are prioritizing the highway over the interchange. Now, I want to build a bridge over the top of the highway, and the way that we're going to do that is to actually go into our landscaping menu, go under shift terrain. I want a small brush and an even smaller brush strength. And now we're going to come where we think we're going to cross the highway and boost this up. And it needs to be at least 7.5 meters above the highway. So now I will level the terrain on either side. So right mouse click this and then basically paste that over here. So now what I want to do is slope the terrain from this top height, right mouse click up here, left click at the bottom, and slope up to this. And we'll do the exact same thing on this side. So I'm going to come at this with the 2-lane, 2-way highway, knowing that we're going to be upgrading a portion of this. And now let's bridge over the top of this, which should be fairly straightforward. And then I want to extend this out a little ways. And the reason for that is we're going to be looping. We're going to switch over to our continuous tool. If we don't extend this out, we won't be able to have a nice circular loop right here. We'll be too close to the highway. But this is pretty good. And when you snap to 90s, you can see you get that nice, perfect half circle. And as we drag this out, it gets bigger or smaller. And we have to kind of guesstimate what we think the right diameter of the circle is going to be. This looks about appropriate. This one might also work. I'm going to say it's this one. And the reason I want the slightly larger circle is now we are 7.7% grade here. Still very extreme, but we'll be able to work with it. And now I'm going to downgrade. Okay, now I'm going to downgrade my highway to have the number of lanes that the highway should have, and then upgrade to have additional lanes where I want my merge on and off the highway to occur. This will make it easy to use snap to guidelines to create the merges in between my half circle up here and the extra lanes in my highway. So I don't need snapping to the zoning cell grid or the zoning cell length. I just want to make sure that I can snap to the lane. And then using the simple curve tool, I'm going to select up here first and then click down here and try to drag into here at a 90. You can see that this is a 90, but it's really screwing up the highway. I'm not going to worry about it. We'll paste it anyway. And the way that we'll fix this is to upgrade that little pinch segment to a 3-lane. And now it looks perfect. We'll do the exact same thing for the other side. And then we'll reverse this. Now, if anything seems off, just get rid of snap to existing geometry. And then using the replace tool, you can slide it around and make it 100% perfect. That looks pretty darn good. Now we're going to do the exact same thing for this other side, but the ramps are going to be a lot easier to figure out. And then I like to join at 90s if I can. It would just be a lot safer. And the reason why I say that is the visibility around the corners here at 90s would just be a lot better. And last but not least, I like to go into the soften terrain tool and just kind of smooth things out all the way around. And there we go. That's a nice looking Trumpet Interchange. Now, the last thing that we have to do is figure out how Washington Street will connect up to this Trumpet Interchange. And I think that we're going to upgrade this to be 4 lanes and then maybe give some dedicated slip lanes to and from the interchange. Bluntly, this is probably overkill. And if you think about it, we're doubling the capacity of these ramps, and usually you'd want to make sure there's a reason for that, but I'll do it anyway for demonstration purposes to show you how to do it. The first thing I'm doing here is doubling the capacity of the ramps going to and from Washington Street. Then I'm going to use my single lane ramp and the curve tool and curving between the 2 roads, selecting these individual lanes, and then downgrading everything so that our lane mathematics makes sense. And then finally, I remove unnecessary movements and try to put the merge in a reasonable spot. So there we go, 1 interchange down, 1 to go. But first things first, let's grab this road and I want to think about where it's going to go. And I think I basically want to follow the tree line and eventually it's just going to go up there. It'll be the main arterial in this portion of the community. Now for our interchange, I think we're going to send up our collector from here, kind of up the hill because we can use this hill to our advantage. We will grab a height that is about 8 meters above this. And I will bring this right here. And I'll do that on both sides. And now let's see if we can build a bridge across here. And it looks like it's going to work out just fine for us. Perfectly level, nice connection on both sides. So now let's work on making our connection to our arterial down here. And then we're likely going to send this thing out this way, trying to respect the topography. So now I need to get the ramps drawn in here and figure out where this road's going to go. And what I think I'm going to do to try to make this super even, let's back that out for now. And I will send this back 32 meters on either side. And that is where we will be sloping from. That's where we'll make all of our connections. So let's add some nice 90-degree angles from here. And now to make these connections, I'm going to turn off zoning cell length. We will have the guidelines toggled. And actually, let's use our simple curve tool to see if I can find the guideline from that lane. I can. Click here and pull it right in. And just like before, we'll need to upgrade that segment, but that is a really nice connection. Now this segment's going to be a little bit more tricky because we kind of have to merge out a little bit. And that's just dealing with the curvature that we have in the road already. We'll use the curved road tool to angle in here after we angle away from the highway a bit. And we'll have to do the exact same thing down here. And now I can reestablish that connection to the road that's ringing the hill. And now to finish this off, I'm going to add a number of roundabouts here. And the main reason I'm going with roundabouts is this is what they look like locally around me. But reasonably, you can do this however you'd like to. Now, the nice thing about this is we could certainly add the road off from here, but we don't necessarily have to. This is a valid way of leaving this interchange for now. And after giving it some thought, I think that we will just leave it. We'll just leave it like this. And when we get back over here for more development, we'll take the road where it needs to go at that point in time. And in the spirit of roundabouts, I think that we are going to add a super node right here. So what I'll do is connect this road up to our existing arterial, delete the arterial back, add a roundabout, and add a sweeping connection through using our parallel road tool and our curve tool. And then honestly, we could leave it just like this. This would work just fine, but we are creating a super node, so I will delete the roundabout and we will have our super node. And I wanted to make sure that this thing was working, and I've seen a couple of cars come up this way, and look at this. Heads down the road and onto the highway. We've got some other traffic heading down here as well. It's working well. I'm pleased with how this turned out. And with our interchanges complete, let's begin to build on challenging terrain. Building in challenging terrain can seem really daunting, but I want to show you some principles that can make it really easy. So I know this is a very large hill, but if we look at our contours, we can see that there are flat pads within this hill. And if we do a bit of grading and site preparation, I bet you that we can find a number of places to develop in here that will have some of the best views in town. So what I want to do is grab a relatively small brush size and a low brush strength, because you're going to want to make sure that if you make a mistake, it's not so bad that you can't correct it. And you can see there are these larger areas that are relatively flat. I'm going to select a height a couple meters beneath the top height, because I like to imagine that I'm grabbing that extra soil from the top and pushing it off the side so we can create flatter building sites. So I will do this and create building pads throughout the entire hill. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, how is this respecting the topography? Well, just because you're respecting the topography doesn't mean you can't grade. In fact, grading is part of respecting the topography. Use the existing topography to create building sites along the existing contour lines. So yes, we are flattening building pads, but we are working along the existing topography rather than creating our own. That is respecting the topography. So now we need to link all of these building sites that we created with roads. And we'll be using our slope terrain tool extensively to make this happen. So the first thing I want to do is slope up from our roundabout right here to this area. And then I think I'm going to use just this basic local road for this entire thing. And all I really care about is snapping to existing geography and the 90. And now we've got to ask ourselves, where are our buildings going to be? And that little blue circle around the road is the full setback for our zoning grid. So at this point, if I were to add this right here, I could have a full 6 units of depth for the zoning. So that is what I will do. And I'm going to really try to pick our spots to ensure that as we're building, we have a whole bunch of space to actually build in. Now, the other technique I like to use is I will use the continuous tool the exact same way that I used it for our trumpet. So that's looping back around, getting that half circle. And then we end up with a nice switchback right there that looks absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to use these exact same principles to work my way all the way up the mountain and down the mountain on the other side. Now, another thing I like to do in areas like this is just kind of send a road back. Now we have a nice cul-de-sac with some building sites back there. Okay, and I wanted to make sure that we had an outlet over here because I didn't want to cul-de-sac this any more than it already is. Now, I want to do a little bit of cleanup work, and you can see I've got a couple of spots like this where rather than getting the retaining wall, I have a normal roadway segment. So if you want to make sure that you get a retaining wall, you've got to just really pay attention to where the ground ends. So for this particular one, what I'd want to do is push this back so that the middle of the road is basically the cliff. So for that, I'll right mouse click up here with our slope terrain tool and slope up from here and try to figure out where that middle of that road's going to be. And now you can see I have a nice, perfect retaining wall right there. Now I decided to use the highway segments right here because it didn't have the zoning grid, and that just makes it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing, especially on a tough hillside like this. It's the exact same reason that I got rid of all the trees. I just wanted to be able to see what I was doing. But the nice thing about this is it's easy to use the replace tool to downgrade this to a local road. So if this is helpful to you, feel free to do this. Now we talked about roadway hierarchy earlier, and I want you to think of this large road as the collector and all of these spurs coming off from here as local roads. Now, one place where our hierarchy is breaking down is right here. So I'm going to repair this area. So for the retaining wall that I just created right here, it's the exact opposite process of the key wall. You just want to make sure that you're moving into the cliffside with about half of the road. Now with that, I've basically got the roadway layout for the side of the mountain or then the top of the mountain figured out. So what I want to do at this point again is go through and clean up some of the rough edges, particularly places where I overshot like this. And for your terrain tools, know that when you're using the soften terrain tool, the larger the brush, the larger the area that you're going to be averaging. So if you really want to restore the cliff and you know it was relatively smooth, use a larger brush because that will average the heights over a larger area. Now I'm going to hold off on doing any more smoothing because we are going to be grading for specific homes as we zone things in. And before we do that, I really think that we need to complete this road right here, which is basically an arterial looping all the way around here, a 2-lane arterial. And then finally, let's take this highway that we have here and convert it to be a local road. The main reason for this is I just want slower speeds going up here. I'm not going to really develop much on this road itself. Now you do have to look, sometimes you'll end up with things like this. You can see how the road shifted just a little bit. Easy enough to fix. We just have to make sure that snap to existing geometry is not on with our replace tool. And then I'm selecting and holding this down so I can shift the entire road. Otherwise, we just move that jog somewhere else. But that's looking pretty darn good. So now we're going to finish the job with a bit of zoning. And for this, again, we want to pay attention to where we have specific lots. So right here where things are dropping off, we'll just pull it out like this. And then where we have things dropping down, right mouse click and continue to pull the terrain down with it. And ultimately what this is going to do is make it so that when we zone in this area, and we're going to do mostly low density, imagine this being a fairly ritzy area, we get fully flat lots now. And the main reason I like to build on flat lots is that the game doesn't really handle building on terrain all that well. So this is a way to make it look good. The other thing about building on challenging terrain is you really need to separate your uses. So one of the reasons I wouldn't just do this is we would get all of these houses tight against one another. So if the terrain isn't perfectly flat, those will look absolutely terrible next to one another. But if you go ahead and just leave a little bit of space, you have the ability to grade in between these or even throw in a tree or something of that nature to make this look better. And in general, I'd say the steeper the slope in between the homes, the larger the space needs to be. Now, before we zone anymore, let's bring water, power, and sanitary sewer to our site. Now, interestingly, if I wouldn't have converted this road, we'd actually have power, water, and sanitary sewer over here. But because I converted this road to be a highway, we actually lost it for our roads department. So let's go ahead. We'll add power all the way around this road. We'll do the exact same thing for sanitary sewer. And now we're going to fill the rest of this in, and we'll do our zoning exactly as we've been doing it over here, making sure that our uses are separated, that there's plenty of space in between them. And then where we have backyards like this, where it kind of tapers off, we're not going to be afraid to go back in and do a little bit of cleanup and then a little bit of smoothing. And now it looks like the site has been prepared and like this was a place that was planned to have homes. Now, as I go through this project, we're going to need to go back and forth between zoning and roads. You are not able to see contour lines when you're in your zoning menu, which I hope gets added in the future, but at the time of recording, you can't do it. And I decided to place one park, and as I place that, we reach milestone 6, Boom Town. We get a whole bunch of development points. We get a whole bunch of expansion permits to purchase new tiles. We get a bit of money, and we get some new policies, which we'll have to explore in a future episode. Now, in an area like this, we really can't do a ton unless we slope things out. So I'm actually going to try to do that. I'm going to pick a top height up here and slide this back into the hillside. And I won't go all that deep because we're spending a lot of money in reality to create this site, but I'll pick another one down here, go back about the same depth, and then we'll use our slope terrain tool to slope between these two heights. Now, so long as I give these buildings enough separation, I should be able to place some. So I'm going to go with 2 units here and only 3 units deep for the buildings. Now, I'm not very satisfied with the way that this cul-de-sac is turning out. It seems like we are wasting a lot of space. If we use a different roundabout, so we'll go with a medium roundabout, we end up with a slightly different zoning configuration. So it's worth testing these out. And it looks like that large roundabout right there gives us the most zoning potential. And ultimately, this would be a very expensive place. So I would like to have as many homes up here as possible. And this gets us to kind of where I was hoping that we would be. And just imagine living up here. What a view. That is outstanding. There we go. That is about as good as I can make this look with the vanilla tools without anything beyond the vanilla tools. That said, I do think that what'll take this to the next level is a bit of landscaping. So what I want to do is try to mirror what we have already on the hillside. And the way that we can do that is just kind of click around a little bit. When you click on a tree, you can see this is an oak. This is an alder, oak. So it's a mixture of oaks and alders. It looks like it's probably 75% oaks with the remaining 30% alders. So I'll just go into my place multiple tool. I'll grab the oaks. I'll say we'll go a fairly large brush, 70% oak, and I'm gonna get rid of the saplings and we'll go with young, mature, and elderly only. And then I'll go back to European so that I can get the alder. For this one, I'll take it down to 30% for the brush strength. And there we go. I think that that looks pretty outstanding. Now, if we wanted to continue to improve this, the kinds of little things that I would do would be try to find areas like this where maybe it didn't quite work to use the brush, and feel free to load this up with trees manually. And the last thing I want to do here is think about views. So what I think I'm going to do is create a scenic overlook, and then I'm going to remove trees behind homes so that they have excellent views of the entire city and the water. I'll also add a few trees here and there to densen up the forest. We've got to take a quick break from the time lapse to take in the view. Look at that. That would be absolutely breathtaking. I love that so much. And the last thing I want to do is check out how this looks from the city. And you can tell you can't see much of anything until you start to go up the hillside. So we have preserved the views of the hill from below. We've developed it logically up top. And I really like the way that this turned out. And I think that if you want to develop on a hill, this is a great way to do it. Come up with development that looks really, really good, really, really natural. And in my opinion, was really fun to build. And now that we've mastered road building, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. Now, I do want to point out I did make a few changes off camera. I couldn't help myself. I decided to modify all the surfaces around here and kind of go through every single lot from the build today and make sure that they look as good as they could. And this is something that I'm really finding that I enjoy. And it's something that I encourage you to do as well. You can see that I've decided to grab all the grass surfaces and pull them through, and then add trees throughout the entire area, just so that it feels a little bit more complete. And that's something that in Cities Skylines 2, particularly after the Economy 2.0 patch, I have made a focus. I also want to leave you with one last overview, just in case you are building along with me. You can see exactly what I've done today. And honestly, most of what we built today was roads. We've obviously got a whole bunch of single-family residential up here, a little bit back here, and we've extended the grid out this way as well. But most of what we've done was working on the transportation network. Now, I've been thinking that in the next episode, we should bring the port to Newport and build a cargo and a passenger harbor. But if you have things that you'd like to see covered in this guide before that, please let me know in the comments below. I want to cover topics in the order that you want to see them, and I want to make sure that I'm hitting everything that you want to see. And with that, we're going to leave it here. I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so, especially if you want to see new episodes in this series as they come out. My goal is to release these weekly, And I appreciate your patience. I missed last week because I was ill, but I'm feeling better and I can't wait to keep moving on this series with you. Thank you so much for your time today. I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.